There were all sorts of stories about him, and so on.
Now I want to switch the subject to Greek philosophy. Mm-hmm. And as to Herodotus, the Greek historian, for example, writes and states that the Zoroastrians taught their children three things. One is horse riding, the use of bow and arrow, and speaking the truth. Did this culture of truth come down from the Zoroastrian days?
Oh yes, without any doubt. But the notion becomes degraded because one often thinks of speaking the truth as merely not telling lies. But that is not the essence of the faith. The essence of the faith is grasping a deeper ideal reality. That's what understanding or grasping the truth is. For example, if you ask me, how many cups of coffee did you drink this morning? And I say one, when in fact I had two. I'm telling you a falsehood. But that's not the kind of lie that Zarathustra is talking about. He's talking about the sort of thing in which I see that so-and-so has been treated unjustly. And someone says, what do you think of this treatment? And I would say something like, well, this is usually the way it is done. I've lived long in the academic life, and I know that's the usual way administrators put it. Well, that's how it's always done. And I once told the president in a situation which I think somebody was very unfairly terminated. And I said, here is a competent person wishes to teach her. He has done nothing wrong. What has happened is that he is in a kind of a program that we don't want to promote. And I said, he is prepared to teach in an analogous one. And the president, this is how it's usually done. And I said, but Mr. President, just recognize what is happening to this person. He is not being treated justly. And he said, well, you know, administration implies certain rules and regulations. I said, if the rules and regulations are such that they lead to injustice, something should be done. He looked at me and laughed. He said, well, what sort of a fellow are you to talk in this way? But the amazing thing was about a week or 10 or 12 days later, he told me, you know, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe we'll put him in this other department, talk to him, and so on. I mean, here was a president in whom the spirit of righteousness resonated. And we could talk this way. This is the notion of truth.
Philosophy originated about 4,000 years ago with the Indo-Iranians. And this is according to Oxford University's Chronology of Philosophers. Also, many Greek philosophers used to live in the Zoroastrian territory and obtained their education in the Zoroastrian territory of the ancient times. Are the Iranians and the Indo-Iranians the predecessors to the Greek philosophy, and when they came into contact with each other, how did they influence the Greek thought and thinking?
Oh yes, the earliest visions we have in the Iliad and the Odyssey and so on is a tribal religion, as all the Indo-European religions were, where there are tribal gods, and you have to placate the tribal gods to manage to lead a successful life. The gods were so utterly human that they were not above trickery among themselves. And so you had to know that and play along. But that view was transformed, and certainly transformed, by Socrates. who said that there was such a thing as right and wrong. And how do you get that? By thought, human thought. And how do tribal societies flourish? They flourish by tradition. This is our tradition. Why are you doing this? Well, that has been the tradition. Our ancestors did it. Our parents did it. We do it. That notion, that tradition was unacceptable to Socrates. In the dialogue Euthyphro, it's an ironic dialogue. This is the last year of the life of Socrates, and Euthyphro is a 25-year-old fellow who has received instructions in the temple. And he says, oh, I've learned all about piety. I know whatever there is to know about it. Socrates says, let's examine then. What is piety? And says, piety is doing what the gods wish and not doing what the gods don't wish. And Socrates says, is this an adequate definition? And Euthyphro says, yes, of course it is. That's what's taught. And Socrates says, yes, that may well be. But shouldn't we examine it? That's the matter. That the human being takes upon himself or herself excuse me, the authority to examine what is given by tradition. And the traditionalists are horrified at that idea. Who are you to examine something which has come to us from immemorial tradition? I've been told that by some of the Zoroastrians who don't like my views, who are traditionalists. And I say, I have nothing against tradition, but I think we should examine it. And they say, who are we to examine it? I say, we are rational human beings. We need no additional authority. And so they say, well, you know, the church at one time, the Catholic Church at one time considered this attitude to be an act of pride, a major sin. Gradually that has been restrained. Oh, well, but you see, this is what we face. And as you point out, that notion of free will is not just a separate notion. There was determinism and free will. The moment you introduce the notion of free will, you introduce the right to examine.
I was reading a book by Ruhi Afnan called Zoroaster's Influence on Anaxagoras, the Greek Tragedians, and Socrates. And he, on page 33, he emphasizes that Anaxagoras, being, I guess, a teacher of the Greek tragedy and Socrates, emphasized to be skeptic and to freely think.
That's right.
And that's the culture.
Exactly.
To have the absolute freedom to inquire and question.
Yes, yes. This is the Enlightenment. That's the concept of the Enlightenment. In the 18th century, this was raised by the French philosophers, by the English social writers, and by Immanuel Kant in Germany, where he wrote an essay. In German is Was ist Aufklärung? What is the Enlightenment? And he says the Enlightenment is the view where you accept, and he has a Latin phrase, sapere aude. Sapere meaning thought. Aude is the same word as audacity, when it means have the courage to think. Have the courage to think on your own. And having done that, you recognize that you have the right to think. But that's not the only part, because then it follows that you also have the responsibility to judge carefully.
I see.
This is the Zarathustrian position was the first one. The same emerged in the Socratic enlightenment of the Greeks and in the Platonic doctrine.